Right here, we're going to go over the LG installation best practices. And this goes for all LG products, right? This is not just for the high walls or for the LVNs or anything like that. This is for all LG products. And this is a general guideline. So I would say please refer to the model specific LG installation guide for all the specific installation instructions for each different model, because every model is going to be a little bit different. Every product group is going to be a little bit different. But again, this is just an overview to kind of give you an idea of how to install these. And so this first page right here is installation workflow. And so it talks about setting the indoor units and outdoor units. One thing, and it kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it, is make sure you have the right model numbers in the proper locations. I have seen it happen on jobs in the past where, contractor orders something and the distributor will sell that product, and somewhere along the way, things get mixed up. They send the wrong model. They send the wrong indoor unit, wrong outdoor unit. It's a multi-zone. They need a distribution box. They forget the distribution box, so on and so forth. So, make sure you have the right model numbers and that they're in the right proper locations. Make sure that obviously everything is not damaged. The indoor unit and outdoor units are not damaged. You want to select your proper mounting hardware. You want to make sure everything is securely mounted. You always want to take into consideration airflow as well as noise. Always abide by the installation manuals for each specific model to make sure that they're correctly installed in the proper locations. To always think about the airflow and noise as well. Next thing, controllers and accessories. These LG, and again, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. When you're using any kind of thermostat with an LG product, you can use a third-party thermostat, but I highly, highly, highly recommend using an LG thermostat with all LG products. These are a communicating inverter product, so you want to make sure that when using an LG controller, you're making sure that system is going to operate in its normal functionality. If you use a third-party controller, you can limit some functionality. You can limit its efficiency. Again, you can do it, but I highly recommend not doing it, and that's using a third-party controller or a third-party thermostat. You want to use or make sure that you have a properly sized ductwork. And that goes always on the contractor. We don't do duct design on the distributor level. So, you want to make sure that your ductwork is sized properly. There's different types of products, again, on the ducted system. So there's a high static, there's a low static, there's a mid static now, there's a vertical air handler. And so each of those is going to have its own specific external static pressure, and you're going to have to run that ductwork according to that. Properly sized filters, properly sized registers and grills, and then if you need a condensate pump or not, depending on the model and depending on where you are locating that indoor unit as well. Piping and condensate, make sure your refrigerant pipes are properly sized. I went over that in another video on the submittals, but you always want to make sure that you're sizing the refrigerant based upon the submittal, what it calls out in the submittal size. You want to make sure the refrigerant pipes are both insulated. This is a mixed state gas system. And so you want to make sure that both the liquid and the vapor are both insulated. Condensate piping is sized correctly. Everything obviously is going to be per local code. You want to make sure that your condensate pipe has proper slope to the drain, as well as you're always, always, always going to use flare connections on all of these systems. You're never going to braze it. You're never going to, you could potentially use some kind of press fittings on it, but I recommend just always using flare connectors and using the flare connectors that come with LG. I recommend not using third-party flare connectors as well. Next right here, kind of continuation on the installation workflow. Your wiring, make sure your electrical wiring is sized per NEC code. I've always used the correct type of wiring. We talk a little bit more about the wiring in a later slide here. Correctly terminated wire connections. Electrical safety devices installed per local code. Always recommend using a surge protector on any inverter product. They are susceptible to dirty power. So always recommend using a surge protector on any, not just LG, but any inverter product. Leak check and evacuation. Confirm you have a leak-free system with 550 PSI test. You want to dehydrate the system with nitrogen. Evacuate the system down to 500 microns. And then you're going to add your trim charge per the submittal. And so there's multiple different ways of getting this information. If it's a multi-F max system, I did a video before on our LG data sheet, and you can take a look at that video. But that is something that I highly recommend. Filling out an LG data sheet, sending it to one of our branches, and then we can run that for you, or run that for the dealer, and then make sure that trim charge is properly weighed in and added, because these systems, it is a critically charged system. So you got to make sure that this is pretty exact. If it's not exact, you can have some issues with it. Then you got to go to your startup and your system test. So you're going to perform your installation checklist. You're going to start the equipment and confirm normal operation in both heating and cooling. And then save all your startup documents for future reference. So that goes for all your line set links, because again, you're going to add the trim charge based upon the line set links that are installed. So highly recommend saving that data, saving any of the trim charge data, saving all of the data, putting in a folder, because if you get a call back, it's so much easier if you have that information than trying to find that information once you've already left and have to come back if you have to service that equipment. So here's the next page: tools to ensure a good installation. Some of these aren't necessarily necessary, but at the same time, they're highly recommended. A 410A direct connect digital gauge set. Depending on when you're listening to this, LG is going to be changing their refrigerant in mid 2024, but to 32A, I believe it is. But at the same time, right now, for the sake of this document and this training, make sure you have an R410A direct connect digital gauge set. 5/16 core remover, dedicated charging and vacuum hoses, digital torque wrenches. When you are torquing down your flare connections, it has to be per spec to ensure you're not going to have any kind of leaks. Digital scale for weighing in your refrigerant. Micron gauge. Again, you're going to evacuate the system down to 500 microns. So you're going to make sure that you're doing that correctly. A good flare block, R410A flare block. Highly recommend one with a orbital clutch on it. You want to make sure those flare connections, and we talk a little bit about flare connections and making your flares, but making sure that you make a good flare, because obviously that's where most of the time when you have a leak, it's going to be at the flare connection. So make sure that you're doing it properly and having the good tools. You're only as good as your tools, right? So make sure you have a good flare block. Nitrogen regulator for up to 550 pounds, or PSI, pounds per square inch. A true RMS meter and needle point leads. Those are very important. These terminals are very small, so you want to make sure you be able to get in there and get a good read on them. And then a good vacuum pump. Again, you're going to have to pump these systems down, so you're going to make sure that you have a good vacuum pump on that. And again, those are available at the local Barsco supply stores, so let us know what tools you need for the job, and we can definitely help you out with that. Next on here, accessories to ensure a good installation. Appropriately sized disconnect box with whip. You can get that information again on that submittal. And if you want to know more information on submittals, go to that submittal training. That's part of this, part of our library or training library. But you want to make sure it's sized properly. Mini split surge protector. Again, I mentioned that, but surge protectors are vital for these systems. I would say over 90% of our warranty issues are burned out boards. And the majority of those burned out boards, the high majority of those burned out boards, are caused by dirty power, and that's because someone doesn't have a surge protector on them. You're going to use 14-4 stranded communication wire to connect your indoor unit to your outdoor unit. So make sure you have that proper 14-4 wire, communication wire. Obviously, again, insulated copper line set. You're going to use an 18-3 stranded, unshielded thermostat wire for connecting your controls to your system. If you need any kind of condenser risers, or if you need any kind of wall brackets or anything like that for your outdoor unit, LG controller. Again, you can use a third party, but highly recommend using the LG controllers. Condensate pump if needed, and then a condenser pad or wall bracket, as I mentioned the wall bracket before. And again, this is all things that we carry at our Barsco location, so just let us know if there's anything like that you need. Now, so the outdoor unit installation considerations, it's up to the lead installer to decide the proper location of the outdoor unit, but here's just some things to consider. Consider noise. These things are very quiet, but at the same time, you may want to consider not putting it directly outside of a window of a bedroom or something like that. But they're much quieter than your typical condenser. So, but at the same time, it's still it's always something you want to consider. Defrost water runoff in the winter season. So these do have a defrost mode. So that is something to consider. Snowfall level. So if you're in a place in Texas, we don't necessarily have a ton of snow, but it is something to consider that you don't want any kind of high snowfall levels that's going to block your fan, on your outdoor unit, because these are a side discharge. They're not a vertical discharge. Your site occupants, obviously, you want to put these where your homeowner doesn't necessarily want to have it smack dab in the middle of a outdoor living space or anything like that. Condenser airflow. And you can mount these side discharge very close to a sidewall, to a building, but at the same time, you still need the proper airflow, and always abide by what the installation guidelines tell you on the specific model and specific unit that you're installing. Also, consider future maintenance and service considerations. We do have a fur-down type unit, so it's something to think about. You want to put access panels. Well, of course, we're talking about the outdoor unit here, but even for the outdoor unit, making sure that you can easily access these. If you're going to put on a wall bracket, you don't want to necessarily mount them too high. You may not be able to get to it, or if it's on a roof or something like that. When placing an outdoor unit within confined spaces, always refer to the engineering manual and or installation manual for all of the clearances. I mentioned that before, but it is something to be very cognizant of. And be sure to allow proper space for future service and airflow through the outdoor unit for proper operation. Always follow the detailed instructions in the installation manual for each type of, this would be an outdoor unit, but it says indoor unit here. But just make sure that you're abiding by that specific installation guidelines or installation manual, I should say, for the specific model number that you are installing. Highly, highly, highly recommend that. Make sure that you're installing it correctly and you're not going to have any future issues. Next is the indoor unit installation considerations. Again, it's up to the lead installer to decide the proper location of this indoor unit. It says outdoor unit there, another typo by me, I'm sure. But the indoor unit placement considerations, noise, space use, the occupants, airflow patterns, your condensate drain, consideration to future maintenance and service. And again, always follow the detailed instructions in the installation manual for each type of indoor unit. Now, talking about proper flaring techniques, this right here is critical. It's a critical piece of your components here, making sure that you are making a good flare fitting. Make sure that you're not going to have any future leaks. So you're going to use a sharp tubing cutter to ensure clean 90-degree cuts. I always recommend you get a new line set. Even if it looks pretty good, just cut off the first inch or two just to make sure that it's, those pipes, they can get damaged in transit. They can come damaged from the manufacturer. So just cut off a little bit just to make sure it's a nice, clean, circular, circle opening, and not, it can get knocked out of whack sometimes, or you might get some dings and dents in the copper. So just make sure that none of that is the case. You're going to ream your sharp edges from your tubing. You always want to point the pipe downward when reaming, because you don't want to get any kind of any of your shavings down into the tube. Then you're going to slide your flare nut under the pipe. That goes without saying, right? But you're surprised, you start flaring, and then, oh my goodness, I didn't put the flare fitting on there, and so you want to make sure you do it beforehand so you don't have to redo your work. Use proper flaring tool. Again, a 410A orbitable clutched flaring tool, highly recommended. You want to check your flare for Craftsman-like finish. And if your flare is defective, if you have any kind of nicks or any dents or anything like that in it, just cut it off and start again. Don't try to cut corners with that. And like I mentioned before, keep your interior pipe clean at all times. Make sure you're not going to have any kind of debris going in there. Again, any kind of copper shavings or anything going into your tube. You can cause some major issues within your system by having that. On the next, some more piping points here for your flare. Check for proper flare matchup. Use a small amount of your oil that's coming from your system on the back of the flare in male threads. You don't have to use any kind of fancy stuff. As a matter of fact, we tell you do not use any kind of Teflon tape or anything like that. If you just a little dab of that oil on the threads and on your fitting, and that will ensure that there's not going to be any leaks. Line pipe before tightening. Be sure the flare nut does not cross your thread when tightened as well. On the next right here, again, I mentioned the digital torque wrench, but make sure you always torque it down to spec. This little diagram right here, this is going to be in your installation manuals, it's going to be in engineering manuals, but it's just telling your torque specs right there. You always use a backup wrench on all flare connections. Use a digital torque wrench with a digital display. It says that you don't have to use digital, but you can kind of get a little more exact with the digital typically. And again, always torque down to LG recommended torque specs, and don't over tighten. If you have a leak, don't just think you're going to throw a wrench on there and tighten it up. You can end up cracking your fitting, and you have all kinds of issues with that. So if you're having a leak, just go ahead and evacuate your system, and then take the flare fitting off and just reflare it. Make sure you're doing it right. Proper flaring techniques continued right here. Don't use leak lock or Teflon tape on flares. I mentioned that before. Again, do not over tighten flares to try and get them to stop leaking. If the flare is properly torqued and it still leaks, it is defective and it needs to be remade. So go ahead and take it off, reflare it. It shows some pictures of defective flares right there. I think this guy has a high potential for leaking right here. So just make sure that you're doing these things properly. On the next right here, talking about the flare fittings, some indoor models do need flare adapters. Those adapters do come with the LG indoor units. So make sure that you account for those when you're unpackaging things. Adapters are used at the outdoor unit or the branch box, but it also can be used on the indoor unit, depending on what the model is. Sometimes a indoor unit, it is a different sized pipe size from a single zone to a multi-zone. So you could potentially need to use these also at the indoor unit. So again, adapters are always included with the indoor unit packaging. So just make sure you don't throw those away. Don't just pull out the indoor unit and throw out all the foam and the packaging because they are in there somewhere. They're typically packed into the system itself, but just make sure that you account for those. And that goes on to say that there. So other piping considerations, and I've mentioned this, and I'm going to keep saying this until I'm blue in the face, but use only the correct line size as determined by the indoor unit or by the submittal, I would say, to supersede that. Always double check the submittal for that specific installation. So again, single zone, multi-zone, whatever that may be. You want to make sure that both lines are independently insulated. Never exceed the maximum pipe lengths. Again, those are all in the submittals or in the installation manuals, but you want to make sure that you abide by the mins and maxes. So never exceed the maximum and never install less than the published minimum pipe lengths. Do not make vertical loops in the refrigerant piping. It can cause kind of a P-trap in the system, and you can have all kinds of issues with that. You want to support your pipe runs from sagging or bending. You do not want to install kinked refrigerant pipe, and always use LG provided flare nuts and adapters. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about leak check and evacuation. You want to confirm a leak-free system with 550 psi of nitrogen pressure test for 1 hour. And there is in the install guide, it kind of walks you through that, because you're not just going to knock it up to 550 psi. You're going to kind of work your way up to that. But you want to make sure that you're doing this and taking the time to do this properly to make sure that you're not going to have any leaks. It's better to spend a little bit extra time in installing it than have a callback in a couple of weeks because there's some kind of leak. Then you're going to evacuate your system down to 500 microns. Triple evac is preferred on these. And then you're going to add your trim charge, if any. So you're going to, again, refer to the model-specific installation manual. It's going to tell you how much refrigerant to add per foot. So how many ounces per foot you're going to add if you're going over the pre-charge length according to this submittal. Next, right here, okay, it does have this on here. So the pressure testing is going to show you right here. So you're going to start 150 psi for 15 minutes, and you work your way up to 300 psi and hold that for 30, and then go up to 550 for an hour. And so, you just kind of work your way up for a total of 1 hour of pressure testing. You're going to come out to your unit. You're going to remove the caps from the high side and low side valves. You're going to use your 1/4 and 5/16 hose adapters. You connect the hoses. Again, you're going to start at 150 for 15, go up to 300, hold for 30 minutes, and go to 550 and hold for an additional hour. So it's telling you to hold it for a total of an hour and 45 minutes of pressure testing. You're always going to refer to the model-specific wiring diagram in the installation manual. So again, talked about wiring for a second before, but you're going to use that 14 4-stranded cable for connecting the outdoor unit to your indoor unit. You're going to use correct wiring procedures for prepping and stripping your wire. Use properly sized spade terminals is highly recommended. Use a correct crimping tool. L1 and L2 are polarity sensitive on all models. So you're going to make sure that you're running from your L1 to your L1 and from your L2 to your L2. Because if you cross those, you will not be functioning properly. Indoor units and outdoor units are 208 to 230. Terminal 3 is a high voltage communication. Never use wire nuts or splices in your wiring. You're always going to run a home run, so make sure you don't have any splices in your wiring. Make sure you always ground your indoor and your outdoor unit, and you're not going to energize your system until the service valves have been opened. And then if an electrician is running wiring from your outdoor unit to your indoor unit, confirm he understands the wiring requirements. If you're dealing with an electrician, recommend definitely sending them the submittals on everything, sending them even the installation manuals, because you always want to give, put the burden of proof on them, right? So if they install something incorrectly, you can always go and say, listen, I give you this, I gave you that, have a paper trail, make sure they understand that, sign off on it, whatever you got to do to make sure that they're installing the correct things, because you don't want to have to go back and then get an argument of finger pointing of who's at fault with everything. On to the next, the evacuation. Evacuate the system down to 500 microns or less. Again, a triple evac is preferred. It's recommended. You're going to use a 2-stage vacuum pump with a check valve. Outdoor unit service valves remain closed during your system evacuation, obviously. But you also want to ensure that your pump is well maintained, and always want to keep oil in your sump clean, right? You want to make sure you have clean oil. I know some guys have had their pumps for years and never change the oil. So just make sure that it's clean, because you're going to make sure that you have a good evacuation. And when everything is clean and good working condition, it takes a lot less time to do that. So at this stage, you're going to add your trim charge before opening your outdoor unit service valves. So again, your service valves will remain closed while trim charge is added to the system. Again, follow all EPA 608 guidelines when handling refrigerant. And there's a little note there. Additional refrigerant charge can be calculated 3 different ways. As I mentioned, LG LATs. I have a whole training on the LATs, but it's something that we can provide free of charge for our dealers. So if that's something you need help with, there's a data sheet that we can get to you to fill out. And then from there, you can make sure that you have the proper trim charge added to your system. But that information is also in your installation manual as well as the engineering manual. It's also, there's going to be some information on the trim charge and the mins and maxes and the pre-charged line lengths in your submittal data as well. So there's really 4 ways, but for the sake of this, we're just saying 3 ways. From there, some charging reminders, so this is startup and commissioning. So you're going to perform your installation checklist. You're going to provide your owner all warranty and owner manuals that come with the equipment. The way you register this product is you go on the lghvac.com website and you can register right there. There's literally a tab that says registration, warranty registration. You just go on there, and if you're an LG Pro dealer, you get a 12/12 warranty on the different products, everything except for the standard and the mega lines, but everything else you get a 12/12 warranty. And if you want more information on becoming an LG Pro dealer, please reach out to our branches. Let us know. We can get you training. It's pretty straightforward, and it's a phenomenal program. You get other things, other benefits besides an extended warranty, but it is a great program to be a part of. Right here, it says use SIMS 2.0 to verify systems operating efficiently. LG has moved on from SIMS. They have an LG MV tool. Again, we can get you one of those. You can purchase one at our different branches, but it's a phenomenal diagnostic tool. You can plug into the outdoor board, and it'll run a whole diagnostics on your system, and then you can have all kinds of information on that system, and it gives you a good baseline. So if you have to go back and perform any kind of service to the system, you can see where your baseline is, where it was running when you first installed it, and kind of be able to diagnose different issues much more quickly, I should say. Then you confirm your normal operation, both in heating and cooling. You're going to save your startup documents for future reference. I recommend saving some for yourself, but also giving them to your customer. Something that you can give to your customer, something that they can have access to. So if for some reason they call another contractor to come out there and check their system, maybe you moved along and you're no longer, you've retired by now or whatever that may be, but they have that information to give to another contractor in the future. And then provide time to help train the owner about the normal operation and future maintenance requirements. It's a great opportunity to sell them a maintenance package, right? Come and clean the system, once a year and change the filters and just do all the good stuff from a maintenance perspective. So again, there's a lot of, and I've pointed you guys a lot to the lghvac.com website, but you can find all that information on that website. Again, installation manuals, owner manuals, warranty cards, service manuals, everything can be found at lghvac.com. It's your best friend outside of your local Barsco as far as LG information. So highly recommend bookmarking that, something that you can, if you're in the field, you can pull that up on your cell phone or on your tablet and access any of that information, in the field. And it comes at a big help for everyone. So again, if you have any more questions on this, please don't hesitate. Reach out to your local Barsco supply house. Let us know whatever questions you may have, whatever issues you may need help with, and just let us know. Let us know how we can be of assistance to you, and appreciate your time today.